Get out of my house before my husband comes home.
Marianne Whittaker's voice was low, sharp, and cold enough to silence every guest in the marble foyer. Rosa Morales stood there in her faded gray uniform, holding a silver tray with trembling hands. On the tray were broken pieces of a crystal vase worth more than Rosa made in 3 months. But the vase was not the real reason Marianne was furious. The real reason was the photograph. The one Rosa had dropped from her apron pocket. The one Marianne had picked up before anyone else could see it. And the one that showed Rosa standing beside Marianne's husband, both of them younger, smiling, and holding a baby Marianne had never seen before.
Marianne's lips tightened.
"You are fired," she whispered.
"And if you ever come near my family again, I will make sure no one in this city hires you."
Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she did not argue. She only looked toward the staircase, where Charles Whittaker's office door was closed. Then she said something so quietly that Marianne almost missed it.
"He should have told you." Marianne stepped closer. "Told me what?"
Rosa lowered her eyes. "Ask him why he kept the picture."
That was all she said. Then Rosa walked out of the Whittaker mansion in the rain with one small purse, no umbrella, and no job.
Marianne Whittaker lived in one of the most beautiful homes in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood. From the outside, her life looked perfect. Her husband, Charles, owned a successful hotel company. Her son, Ethan, attended one of the best private schools in Massachusetts. Her charity events were photographed for magazines. Her dinner parties were filled with senators, doctors, investors, and people who used the word legacy as if it belonged to them. Marianne had grown up with money, but she had worked hard to protect the image that came with it. Everything in her home had a place. The white roses in the front hall. The antique clock from Paris. The family portraits on the staircase. Even the people who worked for her were expected to blend quietly into the background. And Rosa Morales had always been good at that. Rosa arrived every morning before sunrise. She polished the floors, washed the linens, prepared coffee, folded Ethan's baseball jerseys, and left small plates of sliced apples on the kitchen counter because she knew Charles forgot to eat breakfast. She never complained. She never asked for favors. She never spoke unless someone spoke to her first. To Marianne, Rosa was simply the maid. But to Ethan, Rosa was different. She was the woman who remembered his allergy medicine when his own mother forgot. She was the woman who stayed late when he had the flu. She was the woman who listened when he came home quiet after being bullied at school for not being tough enough like his father. Rosa never crossed a line. But she cared. And that made Marianne uncomfortable. One Thursday afternoon, Marianne hosted a charity planning lunch at her home for the Children's Heart Foundation. Women in designer coats gathered around the dining room table while Rosa moved quietly between them, serving tea and lemon cake. Marianne stood near the fireplace, smiling as she spoke about helping struggling families pay hospital bills. "We must remember," Marianne said, placing a hand over her heart, "that compassion is what separates privilege from selfishness." The women nodded. Rosa, holding the teapot, paused for half a second. Not because the words were wrong, but because she knew how different they sounded when spoken by someone who had never had to choose between medicine and rent. Then the doorbell rang. Rosa went to answer it. A man from a courier service stood outside with an envelope marked urgent. "It's for Mr. Charles Whittaker," he said. Rosa signed for it and placed it on the side table near the foyer. As she turned back toward the dining room, Ethan came running down the stairs. "Rosa, have you seen my inhaler?" "It's in your backpack, front pocket," Rosa said gently. Ethan stopped. "How did you know?" "You left it on the counter this morning." "I put it there so you wouldn't forget." He smiled. "Thanks. You always save me." From the dining room, Marianne heard it. The words were innocent. But they stung. "You always save me." A maid should not be the person her son trusted most. Marianne walked into the foyer with her perfect smile still on her face. "Ethan," she said, "go get ready. Your driver is waiting."
Ethan glanced at Rosa, then ran upstairs. Marianne turned to Rosa.
I don't pay you to mother my child.
Rosa's face softened. I'm sorry, ma'am. He asked where. I know what he asked.
The guests in the dining room had gone quiet.
Rosa lowered her head.
Then Charles's office door opened at the top of the stairs. He stepped out, wearing a navy suit and reading glasses, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw Rosa standing in the foyer, something changed in his expression.
Concern. Recognition. Fear. He quickly ended the call and came down the stairs. Rosa, he said, is everything all right? Marianne's eyes narrowed. It was the way he said her name. Not like an employer speaking to a housekeeper. Like a man speaking to someone he had known far longer than he admitted. Rosa looked at him for a moment.
Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. I wasn't going to ask today, she said softly.
But the hospital called again.
Charles glanced toward Marianne.
What hospital? Marianne asked. Rosa froze. Charles's jaw tightened. Not here, he said quietly. But Marianne had already stepped forward. What hospital, Charles? Rosa tried to put the paper back into her pocket, but her hand shook. Something slipped out with it. A photograph. It landed face up on the marble floor. Marianne bent down and picked it up. The dining room guests leaned just slightly, pretending not to look. The photo was old. A little faded.
A younger Rosa stood outside a small church, wearing a yellow dress and holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Beside her stood Charles. He looked maybe 25 years younger. And he was smiling in a way Marianne had not seen in years. On the back of the photo were 3 words written in blue ink. For the life you saved. Marianne felt the room tilt. She looked at Rosa. Then at Charles. Then back at the baby. Who is this child? Marianne asked. Charles went pale. Marianne, I can explain. But those words only made it worse. The charity ladies lowered their eyes. One of them slowly reached for her purse. Marianne's pride burned hotter than her pain.
Not here. Not in front of them.
Not in her own house. She turned to Rosa.
You deceived me. Rosa's eyes widened. No, ma'am. I never. You came into my home. You stood near my family. You accepted my money. And all this time, you had some secret with my husband? Charles stepped forward. Marianne, stop. But Marianne raised her hand. No. She leaves. Rosa's lips parted, but no sound came out. The crystal vase near the side table slipped when Marianne's elbow brushed it. It shattered across the floor. Everyone jumped. Marianne pointed toward the door. Get out. Rosa looked at Charles one last time. The look was not romantic. It was tired. Wounded. Almost disappointed. Then she untied her apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the entry table. I never wanted anything from you, Rosa said to Marianne. Only honesty. Then she walked into the rain. Charles rushed after her, but Marianne grabbed his arm. Don't you dare. He stopped. The front door closed. And something in that house closed with it. For the next hour, Marianne acted as if nothing had happened. She apologized to her guests. She blamed the scene on a personal staffing issue. She smiled until her cheeks hurt. But by sunset, the mansion felt too quiet. Charles had locked himself in his office. Ethan had come home and asked where Rosa was. Marianne told him Rosa had resigned. Ethan stared at her. She wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Marianne snapped, "People leave, Ethan. Get used to it." He looked down. And for the first time in his life, her son seemed afraid of her. That night, Marianne could not sleep. The photo kept flashing in her mind. Rosa. Charles. The baby. The message on the back. For the life you saved. At 2:13 in the morning, Charles finally fell asleep in the guest room. His suit jacket hung over a chair. Marianne stood in the doorway for almost a full minute before stepping inside. She told herself she was not snooping. She was searching for the truth. His wallet was in the inside pocket. She opened it with trembling fingers. There, tucked behind the family photo, was another copy of the same picture. Older. More worn. Protected in a clear sleeve. Behind it was a folded newspaper clipping from 23 years ago. Marianne sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The headline read, "Young hotel worker survives fire after local woman pulls him from building." Her breath caught. There was a grainy black and white photo beneath it. Charles, much younger, sitting on a stretcher with smoke on his face. Beside him stood Rosa Morales. Not as a maid. As a waitress from a small diner in Worcester. The article said a fire had broken out in the kitchen of a roadside hotel during the night shift. Charles Whitaker, then a young assistant manager, had gone back inside to help an elderly guest and collapsed from smoke inhalation. Rosa Morales, who worked at the diner next door, ran into the building and pulled him toward the exit before firefighters arrived. Marianne read the last paragraph twice. Doctors at Mercy General said Whitaker may not have survived without Morales's quick action. Marianne's hands went cold. Rosa had not been Charles's secret lover. She had saved his life. But then why the baby? Why had he hidden it? The next morning, Marianne waited in the kitchen while Charles came downstairs. His eyes were red. He looked older than he had the day before. She placed the photo and clipping on the counter. "Tell me everything," she said. Charles stared at them. Then he lowered himself into a chair. "I should have told you years ago." Marianne did not speak. Charles rubbed his hands together. "Before I met you, I was working in a hotel in Worcester. My father had cut me off because I didn't want to join the family business his way. I was broke, angry, and proud. Rosa worked at the diner next door. She was kind to everyone. I barely deserved it." He looked toward the window. "The fire happened after midnight. I went back inside because a guest was still trapped. I got him out, but I couldn't breathe. Rosa saw me through the smoke. She ran in before the firefighters got there." Marianne swallowed. "And the baby?" Charles closed his eyes. "Rosa's daughter. Grace." Marianne's heart began to pound. "Is she yours?" Charles looked at her, shocked. "No. God, no. Grace was Rosa's baby. Her husband had died in a construction accident before Grace was born." Marianne exhaled, but the relief lasted only a second. "Then why did you keep the picture?" Charles's voice broke. "Because Grace died." The kitchen went still. "She was 8 months old," Charles said. "Born with a severe heart defect. Rosa didn't have insurance. She was working double shifts, cleaning offices, waiting tables, doing everything she could. After the fire, I tried to help. I had no money, but I knew people through my family. I begged a hospital board member for a charity surgery review." He paused. "It was approved too late." Marianne's face softened despite herself. Charles continued. "After Grace died, Rosa gave me that photo. She told me not to waste the life she had saved. She said if I ever became the man I wanted to be, I should help families who didn't have anyone to call." Marianne looked toward the dining room, where just yesterday she had spoken about compassion. The shame rose quietly. Charles looked at her. "That's why I support the Children's Heart Foundation. That's why I built the hospital fund. Not because of branding. Because of Rosa. Because of Grace. Marianne whispered, then why was she working here?
Charles looked down. Because she refused charity. Years ago, when I found out she was cleaning hotel rooms in Hartford, I offered her a job through our home manager.
She didn't want me to tell you the whole story. She said she didn't want pity. She wanted work.
Marianne folded her arms, but her voice was weaker now.
And the hospital call?
Charles hesitated.
Rosa has a grandson. Mateo. He's 6.
He has the same heart condition Grace had.
Marianne's eyes widened. He needs surgery?
Charles nodded.
The hospital is reviewing him today. Rosa was too proud to ask me directly, but she brought the papers because the deadline was close. I was going to talk to you last night. Marianne sat down slowly.
The woman she had thrown into the rain was not a threat. She was a grandmother trying to save a child. And Marianne had humiliated her in front of a room full of women while raising money for children just like him. For the first time in a long time, Marianne had no defense.
Where is she now? She asked. Charles checked his phone. She won't answer. Ethan walked into the kitchen, still in his school hoodie. I know where she might be. Both parents turned. Ethan's eyes were wet. She told me once that when she was scared, she went to St. Agnes Church. The one near the bus station. Marianne looked at her son. You knew that? Ethan nodded. Because I asked her why she was always so calm. No one spoke.
Then Marianne grabbed her coat. The rain had stopped, but Boston was gray and cold.
Marianne drove herself for the first time in months. No driver. No assistant. No makeup.
Just her, Charles, and Ethan in the back seat staring out the window.
St. Agnes was a small brick church between a pawnshop and an old bakery.
Inside, the air smelled like candle wax and wet coats.
They found Rosa in the last pew.
She was wearing the same clothes from the day before. Her purse sat beside her.
Her hands were clasped tightly.
At the front of the church, a little boy with curly hair slept across 2 wooden chairs, wrapped in a blue jacket.
Mateo. Rosa looked up when she heard footsteps.
The moment she saw Marianne, she stood. I'll leave, she said quickly.
Marianne stopped halfway down the aisle.
No, she said. Her voice cracked. I'm the one who should have left my pride at the door. Rosa's eyes filled with guarded pain. Charles stepped forward.
Rosa, I'm sorry. I should have told her. I thought I was protecting everyone, but I made it worse. Rosa looked at him.
You always did hate difficult conversations. A small, sad smile passed between them.
Marianne felt it then. Not romance.
History. A kind of grief she had never respected because she had never known it existed.
Marianne walked closer.
I saw the article, she said.
I know what you did for Charles. I know about Grace. And Mateo. Rosa's face tightened at her grandson's name.
Please don't use him to apologize, Rosa said. He's not part of your guilt. The words struck Marianne harder than anger would have.
You're right, Marianne said. He's not. She looked at the sleeping child. He's part of my responsibility. Rosa shook her head. No. I don't want your money because you feel bad. Marianne nodded slowly. I understand.
But yesterday, in my dining room, I stood in front of women and talked about helping children with heart disease. Then I threw out the one person in my house who had already lived that pain. Her voice trembled.
That makes me a hypocrite. And I don't want to be one anymore. Rosa looked away.
I lost Grace waiting for people to decide whether she was worth helping, she whispered.
I can't lose Mateo the same way. Ethan stepped forward.
Rosa, he said, crying now, please come home.
Rosa's face broke.
She opened her arms, and Ethan ran into them. Marianne watched her son hold the woman she had treated as invisible. And for the first time, she understood that love does not always come from the person with the title. Sometimes it comes from the person quietly folding laundry, remembering medicine, and staying when everyone else is too busy. 3 hours later, they were at Mercy General Hospital. The pediatric cardiac wing was bright, busy, and full of families who looked like they had not slept in days. Rosa sat in a plastic chair, holding Mateo's small hand. Charles spoke with the surgeon. Marianne stood near the nurse's station, watching mothers count pill bottles and fathers stare at hospital bills like they were written in another language. This was not a charity brochure. This was real life. A doctor finally came out with a file. Mrs. Morales? Rosa stood so fast her purse fell. The doctor smiled gently. Mateo has been approved for surgery. Rosa covered her mouth. But the funding? It's been handled, the doctor said. Rosa turned to Charles. Charles looked at Marianne. Marianne stepped forward. Not by Charles, she said. By the foundation. Officially. Properly. And not only for Mateo. She looked around at the waiting room. I called an emergency board meeting. Starting today, the Grace Morales Pediatric Heart Fund will cover urgent cases that cannot wait for paperwork to decide a child's future. Rosa stared at her. You named it after Grace? Marianne nodded. If you allow it. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she could not speak. Then she whispered, people forgot her so quickly. Marianne took her hand. Not anymore. But justice did not end in a hospital hallway. The next day, Marianne invited every woman who had been at the charity lunch back to her home. They arrived expecting damage control. What they got was confession. Rosa stood near the doorway, uncomfortable in a simple navy dress Marianne had bought but Rosa had only accepted after insisting she would pay it back somehow. Marianne stood in the same dining room where she had humiliated her. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Yesterday, Marianne began, I spoke about compassion while failing to show it to someone standing 5 feet away from me. The room was silent. I fired Rosa Morales in front of you. I judged her based on fear, pride, and assumptions. I was wrong. Several women looked down. Marianne continued. Rosa once saved my husband's life. Years later, her baby girl died waiting for heart surgery. That loss helped inspire the foundation many of us proudly support today. A murmur moved through the room. Rosa wiped a tear from her cheek. And yesterday, Marianne said, Rosa was trying to save her grandson. One woman whispered, oh my God. Marianne turned toward Rosa. I cannot undo what I did. But I can tell the truth where I told a lie with my actions. She faced the room again. Rosa Morales is not my maid anymore. Rosa looked startled. Marianne smiled through tears. She is the first family advocate of the Grace Morales Pediatric Heart Fund. If she accepts, she will help families who are scared, overwhelmed, and tired of being treated like numbers. Rosa shook her head in disbelief. I don't have a degree, she whispered. Charles stepped beside her. No, he said softly. You have something some people with degrees never learn. Ethan smiled. You know how to stay. Rosa covered her face. And this time, when the room stood, it was not to stare. It was to applaud. Weeks passed. Mateo's surgery was successful. The first time he opened his eyes afterward, he asked for pancakes. Rosa laughed so hard she cried. Marianne visited the hospital every morning, not for cameras, not for donors, but to sit with families and listen. At first, she was awkward. She said the wrong things. She brought coffee when people needed silence. She offered solutions when they needed a hand to hold. But Rosa taught her. Don't try to rescue everyone in the first sentence, Rosa told her one afternoon. Just be human first. Marianne nodded. I'm still learning. Rosa looked at her. That's better than pretending you already know. Months later, the Whittaker mansion felt different.
Still beautiful. Still polished. But warmer.
Ethan's school picture sat beside a framed photo of Mateo in a hospital superhero cape. In the foyer, where the crystal vase had shattered, Marianne placed a simple wooden frame.
Inside was the old photograph.
Rosa, Charles, and baby Grace.
Below it, a small brass plate read, "A life saved should become a life shared." One evening, Marianne found Rosa standing in front of it.
"I used to hate that picture," Rosa said quietly.
Marianne stood beside her. "Because of Grace?" Rosa nodded. "Because it reminded me of what I couldn't save." Marianne looked at the baby in the photo. "And now?" Rosa smiled sadly. "Now it reminds me that love can come back in ways we don't expect." Marianne swallowed. "I thought that photo meant betrayal." Rosa turned to her. "It did."
Marianne looked at her, confused. Rosa's voice was gentle.
"Just not the kind you thought. It was a betrayal of truth.
Charles should have told you. I should have trusted you enough to let him. And you should have asked before you judged." Marianne accepted the words without defending herself.
"You're right."
From the living room, Ethan and Mateo laughed over a board game. Charles stood in the doorway, watching them with tears in his eyes. Rosa looked toward the sound. "My Grace never got to grow up," she whispered.
"But maybe her name will help other children grow old."
Marianne reached for her hand.
"It already has."
A year later, the Grace Morales Pediatric Heart Fund held its first public dinner at a hotel in downtown Boston. Not the kind of event where rich people clapped for themselves. This one was filled with nurses, parents, children with surgery scars, firefighters, teachers, and families who had once sat in hospital waiting rooms with nothing but fear.
Rosa stood on stage in a blue dress, holding Mateo's hand.
She was nervous. Marianne stood beside her, not in front of her. Charles watched from the first table.
Ethan recorded on his phone. Rosa looked out at the crowd and took a deep breath.
"My daughter Grace lived only 8 months," she said. "For a long time, I thought her story ended in a hospital room." Her voice trembled.
"But I was wrong.
Every child helped by this fund is proof that a short life can still leave a long light."
People wiped their eyes.
Then Marianne stepped up to the microphone. "I used to believe kindness was something you gave from above," she said. "But Rosa taught me that real kindness kneels down, listens, and learns the name of the person in front of you." She turned to Rosa. "I once saw a woman in a uniform and thought I knew her place." Her voice broke. "I did not know I was standing in the presence of the woman who helped build the best parts of my family."
Rosa reached for her hand.
The crowd rose.
Not because Marianne was rich.
Not because Charles was powerful. But because truth, when finally spoken, has a way of healing wounds that pride once poisoned. That night, after everyone left, Marianne found Charles sitting alone in the empty ballroom, holding the old photo. She sat beside him.
"I used to be angry that you kept it," she said.
Charles looked down.
"I kept it because I was ashamed." "Of Rosa?"
He shook his head.
"Of myself. She ran into a burning building for me.
Then when her own child needed help, I couldn't move fast enough. I built companies, hotels, foundations, but I could never outrun that." Marianne took the photo from his hand.
"Maybe we're not supposed to outrun our regrets," she said. "Maybe we're supposed to turn around and make something better from them."
Charles looked at her.
"You sound different." Marianne gave a small smile. "I hope I am." The next morning, Rosa returned to the Whittaker home. Not through the side entrance. Through the front door. Marianne opened it herself. Ethan shouted from the stairs, "Rosa's here."
Mateo ran past him, laughing. Charles came from the kitchen holding 4 mugs of coffee, nearly spilling all of them. For a moment, Rosa stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. This house had once been her workplace. Then the place of her humiliation.
Now it felt like something else. Not charity. Not pity. Family, in the strange, imperfect way life sometimes builds it from broken pieces. Marianne stepped aside. "Welcome home," she said. Rosa smiled. Then she walked in. And the woman Marianne once fired became the woman who taught her what wealth could never buy. Because sometimes the person we look down on is carrying the story that could save us. Sometimes the photo we fear is not proof of betrayal, but proof of a debt unpaid. And sometimes justice does not arrive with revenge. Sometimes it arrives as truth, an apology, a child's heartbeat, and a door finally opened the right way.